On January 8th, 1984, the NCAA made a decision that changed the college landscape forever and gave March Madness its true start as one of the most iconic spectacles in sports, as they moved to the 64-team tournament and brackets that we have seen and come to love today, and gave opportunities that previous teams would have never had to put their names in the record books and win championships. Without this change, who knows what we would do in March? But March Madness changed that, as we all fill out our brackets and root for the underdog that we've never heard of before. We're going to dive into this iconic change that changed not only college basketball, but America's consumption of it today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide, as you daily learn more about sports history, increasing your sports knowledge. As today we learn about the change to the 64-team tournament in NCAA basketball. And today's trivia question to listen out for is, in what year was the first bracket pool started? Listen for the answer throughout the episode, and if you miss it, I will give it to you at the very end. Now, we actually talked about the very first NCAA basketball tournament on a previous episode. We'll put a link in the description about that. And that happened in 1939. It was a response to the NAIT, which had started a year previously with help from Dr. James Naismith, the creator of basketball, which we also covered in a previous episode. And we'll put a link to those episodes in the description for you to check them out as well for a deeper dive. But these tournaments started very small, as the first NCAA tournament had only 8 teams and was won by the Oregon Webfoots before they were the Ducks, beating the Ohio State Buckeyes. And despite the first tournament not being a financial success, they continued on every year after year to compete with the NIT. And for many years, the NIT was actually more popular than the NCAA tournament, as they both happened around the same time. But the NIT played in New York and had a larger audience when it first started out. But in 1951, they doubled the tournament to 16 teams, and it kept expanding throughout the years. And the reason they did this was to accommodate the conference setup that they were starting to use in colleges, similar to what we see today, but on a much larger scale, as they didn't have these super college conferences, as it was a lot of smaller conferences, and the winner of these conferences would be the ones that would get the bid to go play for the tournament. And many teams would actually, when they first started, compete in both the NIT and the NCAA tournament, which is crazy to think about today. It's a lot of basketball in a little time. But as there became more Division I schools and more automatic bids given, they would generally increase the amount. And in 1953, they expanded the tournament to 22 teams and added a 5th round, with 10 teams receiving a bye. And in 1956, they actually adjusted the regions that are more similar to what we know today, where they had an East region, a Midwest region, a West region, and a Far West region. And those names have adjusted throughout the years. And in 1976, they adjusted those to the East, Midwest, and West, which they kept until 1985. And the reason why they did these regions is it allowed teams to travel less for the beginning of the tournament, which was much more needed back in the 1950s, where travel was a lot harder for college teams. And a big rule change in 1971 changed the tournament to what we know today, as it banned teams who declined the invitation to the NCAA tournament to participate in any other postseason tournament, which meant no team could decide to go play on the NIT while also making the NCAA tournament, as the NCAA tournament was connected to the NCAA, and the NCAA gives out the award, so they're not going to let you go play for another competing thing if you decline theirs. So you basically had to decide, did you want to play NCAA basketball, or did you want to go play for the NIT? This was in response to the 1970 into Marquette, who was the 8th ranked team in the nation in the 1970 season, and they declined to participate in the NCAA tournament and opted to play in the NIT and ended up winning that. And the reason for this, they said, was due to their placement in the region But still, it prompted the NCAA to make this rule, and this moment is what made the NCAA bypass the NIT, as the NCAA tournament was connected to the NCAA, which you had to participate in to be part of these conferences. And so because of that, it really shot it up and moved the NIT to more of a second thought postseason tournament, which it is today. And a second rule change in the 1970s came in 1975, when they then allowed more than one team per conference to enter the NCAA tournament. This really arose when there was teams such as South Carolina in 1970 who were undefeated in their conference but lost their tournament and were left out, or USC, who was ranked second in the nation in 1971 but were left out to the top-ranked UCLA that same year. And in 1974, Maryland was ranked third overall in the nation, but lost the ACC tournament and was not able to join. So these issues happened, and so they included more than one team per conference could get to the bracket, and which also meant that they could expand it even more. And they kept expanding little by little every year. And 1979 was a big year as it had the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird title game, Michigan State versus Indiana State, which is the most watched college basketball game ever still to this day, and vaulted in 84 is when they finally expanded to 64 teams. And that would last until 2001, when they would go to 65 teams and have a play-in game. And in 2011, they would go to 68 teams and have 4 play-in games. But even before 1985, the brackets that we all know and love today had already started, as there was a bar named Judy's Club Forest in Staten Island who put together a bracket in 1977 that cost $10 to join, and there was 88 people that joined the bracket, and the winner took home $880. Not a bad haul back then, and it continued to grow every year as college basketball continued to grow into a more formed bracket, and everyone started to know it more and more. And by the time it got to 2006, they continued to hold this pool at this bar. In 2006, they had over 160 entries, and the payout was $1.5 million. They had to shut it down after this as the IRS started to put scrutiny on it, as it was a lot of money, and gambling still wasn't as legal as it is today in the sports world. Although the bracket is kind of the one thing that of sports gambling that has always been kind of just looked at as we'll allow it. There's not been much scrutiny on it. And interestingly enough, in 1978 in Louisville, Kentucky, a man named Bob Stinson had started his own office pool back in 1978. Now, given the internet and social media that we have now, it's not unusual that this could happen in 2 different locations, but this happened independently of each other. These pools started a year apart independently and became popular and gross in the community and really helped steer the office bracket that we know today. And still, to this day, there has been no verified perfect bracket of the 64 teams. Even though there are 68 teams now, we still mainly fill out that 64 bracket with 16 teams in 4 different regions. As the play-in games happen earlier, and we really just focus on the main first round that happens, which is technically the second round of the tournament, as everyone else has a bye. But in order to get a perfect bracket, you have a 1 in 9.2 quintillion chance of getting every pick right. You have a better chance of getting struck by lightning, bowling a perfect game multiple times, becoming a professional athlete, winning an Oscar, being dealt a royal flush on your first hand, hitting a hole-in-one, or being killed by an asteroid. It's something that's never been done, and Warren Buffett offers millions of dollars for people to do a perfect bracket, and no one still has ever done it. And in 1985 really showed that the tournament expansion helped, as number 8 seed Villanova went on to beat the number 1 seed, the University of Georgetown, to become the highest seed to win an NCAA tournament as a number 8 seed. And it was a proof of concept that has continued. And we've seen 11 seeds make the Final Four multiple times in Georgetown, VCU, Loyola Marymount, Loyola Chicago, UCLA, and NC State most recently this year. And there's been a 15th seed in St. Peter's in 2002 that made it all the way to the Elite 8. And multiple 15 seeds have made it to the Sweet 16 in Princeton, St. Peter's, Oral Roberts, and Florida Gulf Coast, all within the past decade. There's more parity in the college game, and it has allowed more teams the chance to win. And without the expansion, we wouldn't have these great moments from these lower schools that have had major upsets and huge drives that have changed the game. Most commonly, look at Gonzaga, who made it to the Sweet 16 in the late 90s and used that momentum to become a powerhouse in NCAA and have now made multiple NCAA championships. This expansion to 64 teams not only changed how college basketball found its champion, it changed the nation as offices around the world do office pools, losing companies millions of dollars, but allowing us all to enjoy the games and keep track of what's going on in a bracket more than any other tournament, frankly, in sports history. It's something that transcends sports. Even people that don't like basketball do a bracket just for fun. And it's something that we can all enjoy. And it all happened in 1985, over 40 years ago. Changed the game, and it changed everything around the country and gave us what is now known as March Madness. I want to thank you for listening to today's episode. If you want more college sports history, check out the Iconic Seasons, a hardwood history of college basketball, where the host Aaron takes you back to the greatest college basketball seasons of all time through the voices of players, coaches, and journalists, reliving the excitement and drama and the unforgettable moments of these iconic seasons. And we'll put a link in the description below for you to check out his podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review wherever you're listening and tell us your favorite college basketball season. And come back tomorrow for more daily sports history. And did you catch the answer to today's trivia question? In what year did the bracket pool first start? It started in 1977 at Judy's Club Forest Bar in Staten Island, where they started with 88 people paying $10 per bracket with a payout of $880 to the winner.